Hi there. So welcome to the part 2 of the Introduction to Public Sector Accounting and Finance, understanding the syllabus and what it entails. In case you missed the part 1, make sure you look at the lesson above, or if you're watching this on YouTube also, check the playlist on Public Sector Accounting and Finance and make sure you watch the part 1 because this is part 2 and that is going to be a continuation of the discussion. So we've looked at A, B, C, and D. Now let's move on to E. Now E is where the real issue begins to happen, and that is preparation of financial statement for public sector entity in line with generally accepted accounting practices. And so preparation of financial statement according to GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices, and that you're going to be it's 20% per the syllabus grading. So what are the financial statements we're going to be preparing? Now we'll be discussing this in IPSAS 1 later on as we continue with our discussion. But you know the financial statements already. We're going to be looking at a statement of financial performance, statement of changes in net assets, which is the same as statement of changes in equity. We're going to be looking at a statement of financial position. Then also we look at the cash flow statement. So how do we prepare these financial statements? In accordance with generally accepted accounting practice. How do we prepare these? It's very, very important for us to look at how we prepare the financial statement. So that is 20% of the syllabus, a huge aspect of the syllabus. That is where you will exhibit your understanding of the various accounting standards, your understanding of the various principles in public sector accounting. More or less, it is like you are in the private sector where after you look at the conceptual framework, you look at the accounting standards, you now come to the preparation of the financial statements. So that is what you have there. E, 20% of the syllabus, and that is preparation of the financial statement. Now remember, when we are dealing with preparation of financial statement, it is not always going to be on the consolidated fund. That is from the central government perspective. Like I told you earlier, when we were discussing the issue in section A about public sector financial reporting in Ghana, I was talking to you about revenue and expenditure. You can prepare, or we could be asked to prepare the final accounts of a ministry, of a department, of an agency, or of a metropolitan, municipal, or a district assembly. So it is not always going to be the consolidated fund, which is the central bank or the central government, but also you could be asked to prepare for an entity that is under the control of the government. So that is the E aspect, 20% preparation of financial statements in line with generally accepted accounting practice. Then we come to F. F is 10%, and that is evaluation of financial statements. That's 10%. This is like interpretation of financial statements in private sector, but this one is going to take a different view, because you know that when we are dealing with the public sector, the idea is going to be slightly different from what you know in the private sector. Now, unlike private sector where you're looking at profitability, liquidity, gearing, investors ratio, you're going to be looking at the same things here, but from different indicators, using different indicators. For instance, you'll be doing some evaluation of the central government. You want to evaluate the central government, you're going to be looking at something such as debt to GDP ratio, okay, debt to the population, okay, we're going to look at the per capita GDP. We're going to be looking at various ratios in the public sector that are used to evaluate the performance of the government, the performance of the government policies, the management of government finances in relation to that. So for 10%, we're going to be looking at appraisal. Now, as I always say, yes, you will know the formula, but it is not about the calculation, it's about the interpretation. Okay, because you are evaluating. So if you do debt to equity, you do revenue to GDP, okay? You do tax revenue to GDP, non-tax revenue to GDP. All of these things are indicators that we can use to assess the performance of government. If you finish the calculation, what does that mean? So when we say debt to GDP, what does it tell us? And if it is going up, what is it informing us? So for instance, debt to GDP, no, GDP is gross domestic product. In case you ran away from the economics class, then it is here chasing you. The gross domestic product. So if you're looking at a gross domestic product, that is the total production, the total value of goods and services that are accrued within the country for a given period under consideration, either with national and then foreigners in the domestic country. That is gross domestic product. So if the total amount of money government generates is somewhere around 300 million Ghana cedis, and the debt of the country in year one, it's say 40 million Ghana cedis. All right? And then in year two, the debt has risen to 95 million Ghana cedis. And in year two, our gross domestic product increased to say 450. If you calculate the GDP, the debt to GDP, what does it tell you? It means that it will mean that if this is your debt and this is how much you're generating, it could mean that when we take out foreigners' contribution, that could affect the liquidity status of the country. That could affect, or that may result to the country later on heading towards another hipping. So not only should you be able to memorize the formulas, know when they say debt to GDP what you're supposed to do, revenue to GDP what you're supposed to do, debt to population what you're supposed to do, but also telling us what they mean, what they stand for, and why we must look at these indicators in evaluating the financial statements in the public sector. So that is 10% evaluation of financial statements in the public sector. Now these two, which one will be best? Let's crunch the numbers and let's see what you got there. 40 over 300. Oh, that is about 13% of GDP. So debt is 30% of GDP in the first year. 95 over 450. That is 21%. 0.1 of GDP. So realize that it's not a good sign for the government. It's not a good sign. These are some of the things that the government uses, and they come and stand out. Yeah, our debt to GDP, even though the debt is rising, our debt to GDP is falling, so we are doing well as a nation. All right, those are all, and to some extent, it could be reliable. To some extent, yes, it is acceptable because your debt is going up, but your debt to GDP is falling. What does that mean? What does that tell you? Or your debt to GDP, it's getting into a generally accepted level. What does that mean? So we'll be doing all of these calculations later on and doing all of the interpretation about them in relation to that. So that is also F about evaluation of financial statements. Then we come to G, EFG, right? Rules and procedures in procurement. So we're going to look at public procurement here. And that is 10% of the syllabus. Public procurement, 10% of the syllabus. This is very fundamental subject matter for the government, because anything the government buys, any expenditure the government pays apart from interest, wages and salaries, dates, everything else is about procurement. Okay, government entities or procurement entities procure goods and services. What rules, what procedures governs? We'll be looking at the role of the public procurement authority, the functions they undertake, the duties they undertake. We will look at the structure of procurement in Ghana right here. We will look at, you know, that we have the public procurement authority, we have the procurement entities, we have the tender committees, we have the tender evaluation committee, we have the tender review boards, and all of these things are there. All of them have various roles that they play in relation to public procurement in Ghana. We will be looking at the various procedures for public procurement, like having a procurement plan, which contains the contract packaging, qualifying of suppliers, disqualification of suppliers. We will discuss the issue about methods of procurement, very critical, very fundamental. I think there are about 4 major methods that we're going to be focusing on, which is spread into international competitive tendering and national competitive tendering. But the 4 methods include the competitive tendering, the two-stage tendering, the restrictive tendering, and then the single source, or what we call the sole sourcing. And we'll be looking at all of these methods under this discussion. And also we will discuss the issue in relation to how review of procurement. So for instance, let's say that the Ministry of Health is looking for want to procure some equipment for some hospitals, for some government hospitals, and let's assume they do the procurement. Sometimes central government may do that, but let's assume they're procuring that, and various bidders. So we have 2 bidders, well, maybe let's say 3, A, B, C, and they all have the requisites, requirements, blah, blah, blah. Then some way, somehow, the ministry gave the contract or awarded the contract to supplier A or company A. But company B says, okay, we've lost it, it's not anything, we now I think we were not having the capacity. But company C sits down and say, why A? Because we are bigger than A, we have the resources than A, we are capable than A. So they don't understand. So if they don't understand and they have any review, they have to lodge, put a complaint in, how do they do it? And that is what we refers to as the review, procurement. And we'll be looking at all of that. First, they must write to the procurement entity, that is the Ministry of Health, and ask them, how did it happen? On what basis did you award a contract to these people? Per the criteria, we are better positioned than these people. Then they will explain to them why the contract was awarded to A and not to them. Now, if after that they are not satisfied, then they can take it to the Public Procurement Authority and lodge complaint about it, and the Public Procurement Authority may come in and make various decisions, and we're going to be looking at that also as we move ahead, and we will conclude on finding out how government can dispose of its stores. So for instance, it has acquired some stores, some assets and all of those things, and they are now depleted, they have been used over years, or they are obsolete. So how do we get rid of those resources? We're going to be looking at the procedures involved in getting rid of all of those government resources in relation to that. So 10% public procurement, a very humongous area that we're going to be looking at, very huge area in the syllabus. Then, so as you can see here, we have 40 so far, and that makes it 90. So the last one from G, you go to H, right? And that is going to be PPP, that is public private partnership arrangement. That's 10%, public private partnership arrangements. That's 10% of the syllabus, and we're going to be looking at how we go through various things. We're going to be looking at the general principles that guides all public procurement arrangement. Remember, we have public arrangement and then public private arrangements. Okay, so like the name suggests, okay, public. That is where 2 public organizations or 2 public institutions come together to undertake a project. Okay, that's if one entity was undertaking it, it would have been more difficult. So they come together as 2 or 3 public institutions and undertake it, and that is public arrangements or projects or transactions. Then we have public-private partnership, where, like the name suggests, public institutions come along with private sectors to execute certain projects that the government would have done it. So Like for instance, the one district, one factory, most importantly, is finance and work through the PPP arrangement. That is a public-private partnership arrangement. So the government will guarantee the funding for the people, for the private sector. They go for the fund and use it to undertake the project, or the government will provide you with the land, the documentation, give you tax holidays on top of it. Just come and open the project up to employ people in that community, to employ people in that district, or to employ more people in the country. So we're going to be looking at all of that as well. Then we will look at the various types of public-private partnership arrangement. I don't want to go through them here because I don't really have all of them offered. But we have build, operate, transfer, build, operate, and like we have a lot of methods, types of public procurement. Did I say public procurement again? Public-private partnership arrangements in relation to that. So that is also 10%. So when we talk about public sector accounting and finance, these are the things that we need to look out for. These are the things that we are going to be going through this 7 weeks, hopefully, in relation to the various discussions, the various concepts that we need to understand in relation to that. Now, like you can see, there are a couple of purely reading aspect areas, and there are a couple of calculation areas. So let me provide you a couple of tips in relation to what you have to expect and what you are supposed to look at it. So public-private partnership arrangements, usually it's a reading area. Public procurement is going to be a reading area. Accounting policies for accrual basis is going to be a reading area. Then you go back to the section A of the syllabus, and that is going to be the issue about, let me get there, the issue about public sector financial statement, the role, revenue management, expenditure control, gifmis, all of those things are more reading areas. So if you look at the syllabus, let me just look at the syllabus, you realize that we have reading areas for about, this is 20, 30, 40, plus 30. So we have reading areas cutting across like 60%, and calculation is like 40% of the syllabus. The calculation involves preparation of the financial statements, evaluation of the financial statements, budgeting, like part of the budgeting also in relation to that. Now, there is something that is embedded in the syllabus that I've not really mentioned, but it's something that we'll be spending some time on, and that is the IPSAS. That is the International Public Sector Accounting Standards, which are issued by the International Public Sector Accounting Standard Board, an organ of the International Federation of Accountants. Now, the IPSAS, we're going to be going through a lot of IPSAS. I have them here, and we're going to be going through all of them. As you can see in your course outline, if you're watching this on my study portal, you have all the IPSAS arranged there in relation to that, and we're going to be going through all the IPSAS because to be able to, like I mentioned earlier, to be able to prepare financial statement, you must understand how accounting policies are treated, how borrowing costs are treated, how inventories are treated, how leases are accounted for, property, plant and equipment, how we deal with all of those things, provisions, contingent liabilities, contingent assets, how we deal with that. So IPSAS, even though like you cannot see it bluntly or clearly in the syllabus, it is something that is there in relation to that, because if the examiner says we should prepare financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting practice, then you have to know that the knowledge of the IPSAS are going to be critical for you to be able to prepare those financial statements in relation to that. So about public sector accounting and finance, this is what you must understand on the syllabus. And throughout the 17 weeks journey, we're going to be taking each of the topics, each of the subjects, each of the things. Did I say subject? Each of the topics and subtopics and break them down and discuss them in much detail so that I can assist you, so you can be in a better position, understand the concept, and be able to prepare well for your examination. So I'll see you in the next video as we begin our discussion with the conceptual framework for financial reporting in the public sector.